Hi guys, and welcome to another batch of mini reviews. If you don't know, this is a series where I review 7 films in the time that it would normally take me to review just one. These are all first time watches for the most part. I'm making a small change to the format today, so I've decided that whenever I do a video like this, I'm going to make it so that there are 6 horror films and 1 non-horror film. That's going to be a permanent thing now. I'm going to throw in a wildcard pick, which is non-horror, probably about halfway through the video just to break it up a bit. And if you're really observant, you may have already noticed from today's thumbnail what this week's wildcard pick is. But other than that, there's nothing else to say. Let's dive into the movies. Let's find out what I've been watching these last few weeks. We'll start with this film. So first up we have After. Strange title for a horror film. This is definitely not the wildcard pick already, by the way. I've got an interesting relationship with this film because I first saw it pretty much when it came out back in the noughties, or at least I saw most of it one night. I think I was too tired to watch the whole thing, but the following day or the following week I couldn't remember what it was called, so I couldn't find it again, and it's taken me nearly 20 years to finally track it down. And now that I have, thanks to a DVD I bought on eBay, I've got to say it's not quite the film that I'd built it up to be in my head. Funny how that always happens, isn't it? So this is about 3 thrill seekers who basically go around the world breaking into places. Usually there's a high degree of danger involved. So in the prologue we get to see them at work. They break into this industrial building, run up to the top floor, jump off with parachutes, and there's like security guards going after them and stuff. But when we get into the main bulk of the movie, what they want to do is go to Russia and break into the abandoned train tunnels beneath Moscow, so the ones that supposedly Stalin used to use. So obviously a very dangerous thing to try and do. I mean, the Russians don't want Americans poking around down there at the best of times. And this movie is very exciting, watching this trio attempt to pull this off. The whole thing is in found footage though, and it's very shaky. Like, this is from the earlier era of found footage where they hadn't quite learned to not be so shaky, if you know what I mean. I felt a little bit seasick after a time, and I think for some people that's going to be a real issue with this film, actually. And it's got to be said, when it gets to the final third of this film, the budget clearly runs out at some point, because it just feels like they're doing the final third of the film on the cheap. The story goes a little bit surreal and weird in the last sort of 20-30 minutes, and I suspect this is to compensate for the fact that they didn't have the budget to go too far past the hour mark, if you see what I mean. But still worth a watch, I'd say, just for the really exciting adventure feel of the first hour. So maybe don't go out and buy this on eBay like I did, but if you see it on streaming and it's free because you're subscribed or whatever, then check it out. It's called After. 3 out of 5. Next we have Escape Room Puzzle of Fear. I hope I've got that title right. So I love the concept of escape rooms, so anytime I see a new movie that's come out that involves escape rooms, I'm right there. And I spotted this on Amazon Prime the other night, dived right in. So it's about these 2 couples who decide to check out the brand new escape room downtown somewhere. One of the men is clearly some kind of criminal. There are just too many clues in the early stages that there's something seriously wrong with this guy. But what I really liked about this film for the longest time is that the escape room itself is very true to life. This isn't one of those films where you get some giant John Kramer kill factory going on, like what you see in that film Escape Room, or an Escape Room Tournament of Champions. No, you get a very believable escape room in this, with characters just wandering around looking for digits that will go into a safe, and everybody's working together, and it all feels very real. But obviously at some point you have to up the ante, and there's probably going to be dead bodies and stuff, but this film just can't make that transition. The budget runs out at some point, just as it did with that film After I was talking about a minute ago. And the last 20 or 30 minutes of this, it's just like dialogue in a really blank room. It's just really odd how this film ends. There's such a lack of excitement when you get to the finale of this. Now, I did really like the performance of the main girl here. This actress, I don't know her name, but she's got a hell of an X factor. I enjoyed watching her in this movie, but that was only a small thing for me to enjoy. That and the fact that for a brief period of time I liked watching the escape room play out. But I'm only going to give this 2 out of 5. For the longest time, this was going to get a hell of a lot more than that, but it just crashes and burns in the last sort of half an hour. It's really disappointing. So every time I do a video like this, there always seems to be at least one piss poor Texas Chainsaw / Wrong Turn knockoff that makes it into the lineup. And Butchers is that film for this week. I need to stop doing this to myself in the vain hope that I will discover the next Texas Chainsaw or Wrong Turn. It's not going to happen, or at least it will only sort of happen once in a blue moon, and it certainly didn't happen with this film. So we've got a group of freaks and weirdos who live in a shack somewhere. One of them just happens to run the local gas station, so basically the chef character from Texas Chainsaw. One of them just happens to be freaky looking and mute, so basically Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and so on and so on. We get a group of 4 youngsters, 2 couples who are about college age. They're driving through this neck of the woods and they break down predictably. 2 of these people are cheating on the other 2, and I think the movie thinks that this is really raw and edgy and exciting, but I'm just thinking, what a pair of arseholes who clearly haven't grown up yet. And what we get throughout most of the runtime is just torture and suffering, and every now and again somebody will escape for about 30 seconds before they are swiftly captured again. This film does that trope where somebody will escape in the wilderness, but instead of just heading into the bush, they will head to the nearest main road and go, "Help! Help!" And then the very next car that comes along will just happen to be the cousin of the freaks and weirdos. How many times have I seen this in a movie now? I blame The Goonies, because I think that might have been the first time it happened, but I've seen it so many times. It's what I'm expecting the minute that they start trying to flag a car down. There's another moment in this film where 2 girls escape, and I'm thinking, just run into the forest, just run. But one of them says, "Hey, let's go to the pickup truck. We can use that to escape." And I'm thinking, no, that's like the only place where the villains will think to go and wait for you. Don't do it. It's so frustrating watching this film. Bizarrely, it has a sequel. How? It's amazing to me, but I will certainly not be watching part 2. This is the stinker of the week. 1 out of 5. And I'm going to try really hard for the next mini reviews video not to have a Texas Chainsaw / Wrong Turn knockoff. So we've arrived at the wildcard pick, which is Love Lies Bleeding. This is a crime thriller, and the reason I watched this is because Rose Glass is the director. She did the excellent Saint Maud a few years ago, and I was keen to see what she would do with the second movie, even if it wasn't horror. So this is about a couple of lesbians who get together. One of them is a worker at the local gym. The other one is a wannabe pro wrestler. They want to leave the small town they're living in and move to the bright lights of Vegas, I believe, but they get embroiled in a crime story that puts their lives in danger. It just so happens that the dad of one of these girls is the boss of a local crime syndicate, which is never good. I'm not going to take the plot any further, but this is a very stylish film, as I would expect from this director. Some great music. A lot of the drama is well written. There's lots of lesbian lovemaking scenes, if that's your bag. Kristen Stewart is on top form in that regard, let me tell you. Where this film falls down a little bit is on the crime side of things. The story goes in some really bonkers directions in the second half of this film. There are some stupid character decisions that just didn't sit easy with me. The film definitely needed a bit more polish in the rewrite department. It's still a good film, but it's nowhere near as good as Saint Maud. I'm going to give it a solid, if unspectacular, 3 out of 5. So by the time I got to this, the 5th film out of 7 for this video, I was just starting to panic a little bit that we've not had a really great film, because I want to have a film of the week every time I do one of these, and nothing up to this point would take that tag, really. So I decided to make my next film something quite famous that I'd not seen before. I was looking for a guaranteed hit, almost. So I thought of this film, Hatchet, because I've never seen any of these before. It is a famous slasher franchise, so I thought maybe this is going to be the one. This is going to be the one that gets a solid 4 or 5 out of 5 maybe, who knows. No, I did not like this film. So we've got a bunch of people in New Orleans. They're going on a trip into the swamp. It's like a local tour. And once they get out there, the boat gets stuck and they all end up in the reeds. And there's a serial killer living nearby called Victor Crowley. He's basically a Jason Voorhees knockoff, and that's your lot, essentially. Now, the first 30, 40 minutes is all right. There's some good comedy. Some of the characters are actually pretty good. I especially like the blonde woman who's so completely ditzy. It's hilarious. She gets some great lines in this. She says something like, 911, are you sure that's the right number? What else does she say? I can't believe that guy has fooled me 3 times now, and so on. She was a lot of fun. But the actual horror side of this film is really amateurish. Like, as soon as we're into the real meat of the film and Victor Crowley's running around trying to get everybody, like, all this film is the characters stood in the reeds somewhere talking really loudly. In other words, they're giving themselves away in a really stupid way. And then Crowley will pop up like a jack-in-the-box, kill somebody. Then the characters will run away to another area that looks exactly the same as the area they were just in. They weren't filming in many places in this. And then just rinse, repeat until the end of the film. There's no atmosphere, a few gory kills that will impress the gorehounds. But for me, I just want a bit more sophistication than this. It was very, very straightforward. I would have expected more from such a famous slasher film, in all honesty. So I'm going to give this 2.5 out of 5, purely because I enjoyed the comedy. But the actual horror, dearie me. There are 3 more Hatchet films. I'm not in a rush to see them now, I must say. The Sect opens with a flourish. There's a group of hippies living in a bunch of caravans out in the wild, and then a weird Jesus Christ type figure just walks out of the desert, introduces himself, and just as I'm pondering this, turns out the guy's got some buddies nearby, and there's a bit of a slaughter that happens during the night. There's rape and murder, but this sets up a really good horror story, potentially a great little folk horror, and certainly a great villain has been established as well. So I'm really into the film at this point. I'm looking forward to the rest of it. And then we fast forward to beyond the credits, and it turns into a completely different movie. Time jumps ahead 20 years. We move to a completely different part of the world, i.e. Frankfurt in Germany, and for the next hour, I had no idea what the main story had to do with that really cool prologue. It was extremely frustrating. This movie is 2 hours long, and it had absolutely no need to be. There's a really boring stretch of this where the main final girl, if you want to call her that, she's getting to know this mysterious middle-aged guy, and every now and again there'll be a random thing that happens that makes us think, oh, is this some kind of witchcraft that's somehow connected to the prologue? And we get some answers eventually, but they're not entirely satisfying. Things pick up in the last half an hour when the action quotient steps up and there's a few kills and, you know, good little horror flourishes, but the whole film is just a bit of a waste after that opening, it's got to be said. So I'm going to give it 2 out of 5. This one came out quite a long time ago, early 90s. I think it's an Italian film with subtitles. It's got Dario Argento Presents on the top of it, which did briefly get me excited, but it's more later era Argento in terms of overall quality, I would say, rather than earlier era Argento. Not that he's directing this thing, of course. Just before I watched this film the other night, I was in the depths of despair because I was thinking to myself, oh my god, this is going to be the first mini reviews video I've ever done where I can't even name one excellent film to recommend to people. A bunch of averagey sort of ones, but no really excellent films, and that was kind of depressing. I thought to myself, people are going to just think I'm a miserable git turning the camera on and whining about all these movies without having anything too positive to say about any of them. And then I came across The Strangers Prey at Night. Now, I gave up on this franchise a long time ago, after one film actually, because I watched the original several years back. I really didn't like it. I hated how all the villains just seemed to teleport all over the place, that the 2 main characters didn't do anything for me. I was just bored by the whole thing, and I had no interest in watching part 2. And the fact that I watched it the other night was entirely down to me just scrolling through a bunch of films, coming across The Strangers Prey at Night and thinking to myself, well, go on then. I mean, any film I put on at this point is going to be bad, so who cares what I watch? Because I'd had such a bad fortnight leading up to this particular night with all the various films I'd tried. But colour me amazed, Strangers Prey at Night turned out to be an amazing slasher film. So this time around, we've got a family who travel to this caravan park, holiday park somewhere. They are the first people there at the start of the season, so there's nobody else there apart from the strangers, of course, who've turned up to play. And we get this cat and mouse game between the two sides, and it's fantastic. There are kills on both sides. There's some great atmosphere in this. There's no moment that took me out of the whole thing. There's no obvious teleportation going on this time. I loved how different villains turned up at different moments, and it was a real thrill ride. I just thought it was great. It really stylishly directed as well by Johannes Roberts, who did the 47 Meters Down films. As soon as I saw his name on the front of the movie, actually, I did think to myself, that's interesting. I didn't know that he did this film. I'm a bit more interested in this than I was 5 minutes ago. There's a phenomenal scene with a swimming pool that I absolutely loved, but I'm not going to start spoiling the whole thing if you haven't seen it. But yeah, I'm suddenly into this franchise again, or I'm into this franchise for the first ever time, shall I say, because it's not like there was ever previously a point where I liked The Strangers, but I actually kind of feel like watching the new reboot one that's come out now. Maybe I'll review that or stick it in the next mini reviews video. But I'm going to give this one 4 out of 5, and believe me, it was closer to the 4.5 score than the 3.5 score. A really good slasher film. Right, we will wrap it up for today. Unless you want to stay with me an extra minute to hear my latest reading update. Oh, before we go there though, I've got to ask the question, who the hell is Tamara? So I'm still on The Stand. I have made some decent progress though since my last update. So I'm on page 724 out of around about 1,300 or 1,400 pages. So I'm about halfway through. I'm just at the point, if you know this story, I'm at the point where characters are just starting to arrive at Boulder and Las Vegas. So I'm getting into that half of the book, but it's so good. This has been a favourite book of mine since childhood, and I've loved reading it again, and I'm absolutely going to check out the miniseries again for the first time in years after I've read the book. But that is essentially my update, so I'll leave it there for today. Just to recap the main portion of the video, my film of the week was The Strangers Prey at Night, and my stinker of the week was Butchers. Until next time, cheerio, bye-bye.